a quiet little neighborhood tucked away from the noise of the city, there lived an elderly woman named Mrs. Evelyn Harper. Her house was nothing extraordinary. It wasn't the biggest or fanciest on the block, but it had one feature that caught everyone's attention: a large, sparkling swimming pool in her backyard. The pool shimmered like a giant blue gem under the sunlight, its surface rippling gently whenever a breeze passed by. It stood out so much that people couldn't help but notice it as they walked or drove past her home. Mrs. Harper was a kind-hearted woman in her late 60s, with silver hair always tied neatly into a bun and glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. She lived alone since her husband passed away years ago, and her only family, a granddaughter who visited occasionally, lived far away in another state. Despite being surrounded by neighbors, she often kept to herself, tending to her garden or reading books on her porch. But even though she seemed content with her peaceful life, the pool remained a constant reminder of happier times. It was where her grandchildren used to splash around during summer vacations, where birthday parties were held, and where laughter echoed endlessly. Now, however, the pool sat mostly unused, except for when Mrs. Harper took a dip every now and then to cool off during hot afternoons. The teenagers in the neighborhood, however, saw the pool differently. To them, it wasn't just water. It was an invitation, an irresistible temptation they couldn't ignore. Jake, Mia, and Ryan were three, friends who spent most of their free time together. Jake was the bold one, always coming up with wild ideas and daring his friends to join him. Mia was thoughtful and cautious, often trying to talk sense into the others but eventually giving in to peer pressure. Ryan, on the other hand, was the joker of the group, always cracking jokes to lighten the mood, even when things got tense. One afternoon, while walking home from school, the trio found themselves staring at Mrs. Harper's pool once again. The summer heat was unbearable, making sweat trickle down their backs despite the shade provided by the trees lining the street. "Wouldn't it be amazing to jump in right now?" Jake said, breaking the silence. His voice was laced with longing as he gazed at the shimmering water. Mia rolled her eyes but didn't say anything, knowing full well that Jake was about to suggest something reckless. Ryan grinned mischievously, already catching on to what Jake was thinking. "You're not seriously considering sneaking in, are you?" Mia asked, raising an eyebrow. She glanced nervously toward Mrs. Harper's house, expecting the elderly woman to appear at any moment. But the house looked empty, its windows dark and curtains drawn shut. There were no signs of movement. "Inside? Why not?" Jake replied, shrugging nonchalantly. "She's hardly ever outside. Besides, we've seen her leave the gate unlocked plenty of times." Mia hesitated. She knew Jake was right. Mrs. Harper wasn't exactly vigilant about securing her property. In fact, the entire neighborhood had grown accustomed to seeing her gate slightly ajar, as if inviting visitors to come in. Still, the idea of trespassing made her stomach churn with unease. "It's wrong," she muttered, more to herself than to the others. "What if she catches us?" Ryan chuckled, slinging an arm around her shoulders. "Relax, Mia. We'll go late at night when she's asleep. She won't even know we were there." For the rest of the day, the thought lingered in their minds, growing stronger with each passing hour. By evening, the unbearable heat had turned their homes into stifling ovens, forcing them to sit near fans or lie on cold tiles to find relief. As they sat together in Jake's garage, brainstorming ways to beat the heat, the conversation inevitably returned to Mrs. Harper's pool. "We could just take a quick dip," Jake insisted, leaning forward with excitement. "No one will know, and it's not like we're hurting anyone." Mia sighed, torn between her conscience and the overwhelming desire to escape the oppressive heat. "If we get caught," she began, trailing off as doubt clouded her thoughts. "We won't," Ryan interrupted confidently. "Trust me, this is going to be fun." Eventually, Mia gave in, partly because she didn't want to be left out, and partly because the allure of the cool water was too strong to resist. They agreed to meet later that night, once the streets grew quiet and the stars filled the sky. Each of them went home to prepare, stuffing towels into backpacks and slipping into swimsuits underneath their clothes. As the clock struck midnight, they gathered at the corner of the street, hearts pounding with anticipation. The night air was thick with humidity, clinging to their skin like a damp blanket. Shadows stretched long across the pavement, cast by the dim glow of streetlights. Moving cautiously, they approached Mrs. Harper's house, sticking close to fences and bushes to avoid being seen. Every step felt heavier than the last, their sneakers making soft squeaking sounds against the wet grass. When they finally reached the gate, Jake pushed it open slowly, cringing at the faint creak it made. To their relief, the house remained silent, its windows still dark. They tiptoed across the patio, careful not to disturb anything. The pool loomed before them, its surface reflecting the pale light of the moon. For a moment, they simply stood there, mesmerized by how beautiful it looked under the starlit sky. Then, without hesitation, they dropped their bags and climbed over the edge, sinking into the refreshing water with sighs of pure bliss. As they floated lazily, splashing each other playfully, guilt briefly crossed their minds. But the sensation of cool water against their overheated skin quickly drowned out those thoughts. They laughed quietly, sharing stories and jokes, completely unaware that Mrs. Harper was wide awake, watching them from her bedroom window. She had seen the flicker of movement outside and pulled back the curtain just in time to catch sight of the intruders. Instead of confronting them immediately, she decided to let them enjoy their swim. For now. Little did they know, this would be the beginning of a lesson they would never forget. The first night at Mrs. Harper's pool was exhilarating for Jake, Mia, and Ryan. The cool water had washed away not just the sticky heat of the day, but also their initial fears of getting caught. They left her backyard feeling like they had discovered a secret paradise, one that no one else in the neighborhood had dared to explore. Over the next few days, they couldn't stop talking about it. Every conversation revolved around how amazing the pool felt, how peaceful the night air was, and how lucky they were that Mrs. Harper hadn't noticed them. Jake was the most enthusiastic of the three. "We should do it again," he said during lunch break at school, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "It's not like she uses it anyway. What harm are we doing?" Mia hesitated, nibbling on her sandwich. She still felt uneasy about sneaking into someone else's property, even though nothing bad had happened so far. "I don't know," she murmured. "What if she finds out? Or worse, what if one of the neighbors sees us?" Ryan waved off her concerns with a dismissive laugh. "Come on, Mia, stop worrying so much. We're careful, remember? No lights, no noise, no evidence. Besides, Mrs. Harper is practically invisible. When was the last time you actually saw her outside?" Mia didn't have an answer to that. It was true. Mrs. Harper rarely ventured beyond her front door unless it was to check her mailbox or tend to her garden. Most of the time, her house seemed quiet and unoccupied, which only fueled Jake and Ryan's confidence. By the end of the week, they had convinced Mia to join them for another late-night visit. This time they brought snacks, a bag of chips and some sodas, to make the experience feel more like an adventure. As they crept through the shadows toward Mrs. Harper's house, the thrill of breaking rules sent adrenaline coursing through their veins. The gate creaked open just as loudly as before, but none of them cared. Their footsteps were lighter now, their movements more practiced. They knew exactly where to step to avoid making too much noise. When they reached the pool, Ryan grinned mischievously. "Last one in is a rotten egg," he shouted in a hushed whisper, tossing his towel aside and jumping into the water with a splash. Jake followed suit, diving gracefully while Mia lingered near the edge, dipping her toes in cautiously. For a moment, all worries melted away. They swam, laughed, and shared stories, completely absorbed in the joy of the moment. But as the nights went by, their visits became bolder. At first, they stayed for only 20 minutes or so, leaving quickly to minimize the risk of being caught. Soon, however, they began extending their stays, lingering longer in the water and bringing more items with them each time. One night, Jake brought a waterproof Bluetooth speaker, blasting soft music that echoed faintly across the neighborhood. Another time, Ryan suggested they try flips off the diving board, despite Mia's protests that it was too dangerous. Their carelessness started showing. Towels were left behind, forgotten in the rush to leave. Footprints marked the damp concrete around the pool, and crumbs from their snacks littered the patio. One evening, Jake accidentally knocked over a potted plant near the lounge chairs. Panicked, they tried to clean up the mess, sweeping the broken pieces into a corner, but shards of ceramic remained scattered across the ground. None of them thought twice about it. They figured Mrs. Harper wouldn't notice such small details. What they didn't realize was that Mrs. Harper noticed everything. From her bedroom window, she observed their every move, her expression unreadable. She saw the muddy footprints leading to and from the pool. She spotted the misplaced furniture and the growing pile of debris hidden in the bushes. Each new sign of disrespect weighed heavily on her heart. This pool wasn't just a random feature of her backyard. It held decades of memories, laughter, and love. Watching these teenagers treat it so carelessly made her chest tighten with sadness and anger. Instead of confronting them outright, Mrs. Harper decided to play a game of her own. She wanted them to understand the consequences of their actions without resorting to yelling or calling the authorities. So, she began leaving subtle hints that something, or someone, was watching them. One night, as they approached the gate, Jake froze mid-step. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. The sound of rustling leaves had startled him, though it was probably just the wind. Still, unease settled in his stomach. "Probably just a squirrel," Ryan said, trying to sound confident, but his voice wavered slightly, betraying his own doubts. When they entered the backyard, they found the garden hose coiled tightly around its holder, an unusual sight, since it was usually left slack and unraveled. A small wooden sign had been taped to the fence, its bold letters spelling out private property in capital letters. Jake snorted when he saw it. "Seriously? Like this is gonna scare us?" Mia frowned, staring at the sign. "Maybe we should listen to it," she muttered under her breath. "This feels weird." Despite her reservations, they continued with their plans, diving into the pool and splashing around as usual. But halfway through their swim, Ryan suddenly stopped, his face pale. "Guys, did you see that?" he asked, pointing toward the house. They turned to look, their hearts skipping a beat. For a split second, they thought they saw movement behind the curtains, a shadow shifting ever so slightly. Was it Mrs. Harper? Or was it just their imagination playing tricks on them? "Let's get out," Mia urged, grabbing her towel. "I don't like this anymore." Reluctantly, Jake and Ryan agreed. As they hurriedly gathered their belongings and slipped out of the gate, none of them noticed the faint smile tugging at the corners of Mrs. Harper's lips as she watched them retreat. Her plan was working. They were starting to feel uneasy, questioning whether sneaking into her pool was worth the risk. Over the following nights, the signs multiplied. Once they arrived to find the floodlights surrounding the pool switched on, bathing the entire backyard in harsh brightness. Another time, the gate was locked, forcing them to climb over the fence instead. Each obstacle tested their resolve, making them wonder if they should give up altogether. Yet stubbornness and the allure of the cool water kept them coming back. Unbeknownst to them, Mrs. Harper was carefully observing their reactions. She noted how Jake grew increasingly irritated, brushing off every warning as meaningless. She saw how Ryan's bravado faltered, his jokes becoming less frequent as fear crept in. And she watched Mia, who seemed torn between loyalty to her friends and her growing sense of guilt. One evening, as she sat in her living room flipping through old photo albums, Mrs. Harper paused on a picture of her granddaughter standing beside the pool. The girl's curly hair was wet, her cheeks flushed with happiness and her arms wrapped tightly around Mrs. Harper's waist. Tears welled up in her eyes as she remembered all the summers they had spent together, laughing and playing in the water. Those memories were precious to her, and seeing strangers disrespect the very place where those moments happened broke her heart. Determined to teach the teenagers a lesson they wouldn't forget, Mrs. Harper prepared herself for the final act of her plan. She knew it was time to confront them, not with anger but with understanding. After all, she had been young once too, and she understood the pull of curiosity and rebellion. But she also believed in accountability and respect. Little did Jake, Mia, and Ryan know their next visit would change everything, not just for them but for Mrs. Harper as well. The night was darker than usual. the moon hidden behind thick clouds that promised rain. The air felt heavy, charged with an electricity that made Jake, Mia, and Ryan uneasy as they approached Mrs. Harper's house. They had debated whether to come at all. After all, the recent warnings had left them jittery, but the heat wave showed no mercy, and the thought of cool water proved too tempting to resist. Besides, Jake insisted that Mrs. Harper was probably just messing with their heads. "She's bluffing," he said confidently, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. If she really cared, she would have called the cops by now. Mia wasn't so sure. She kept glancing over her shoulders, half expecting Mrs. Harper to appear out of nowhere like a ghost. Her nerves were frayed, and every rustle of leaves or distant bark of a dog sent shivers down her spine. "I don't think this is a good idea," she whispered for what felt like the 100th time. But Ryan, ever the peacemaker, nudged her playfully. "Relax, Mia. We'll be in and out before you know it." When they reached the gate, they found it unlocked again, a small victory that boosted their confidence. Jake pushed it open cautiously, wincing at the familiar creak. Inside, the backyard looked eerily still, the pool glistening under the faint glow of the floodlights. Something about the scene felt off, though none of them could pinpoint exactly why. The atmosphere was tense, almost suffocating, as if the night itself was holding its breath. They tiptoed toward the pool, dropping their bags near the edge. Just as Jake was about to jump in, a sudden noise froze them in place. It was sharp and metallic, the unmistakable sound of a door opening. Their heads whipped around simultaneously, eyes wide with panic. From the shadows emerged Mrs. Harper, dressed in a bathrobe, her silver hair glowing faintly in the dim light. In one hand she held a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness like a blade. "I've been expecting you," she said calmly, her voice carrying an edge that sent chills down their spines. For a moment no one moved. Jake, Mia, and Ryan stood rooted to the spot, dripping wet and trembling with fear. The silence stretched on, broken only by the soft hum of crickets in the distance. Finally, Jake managed to stammer, We didn't mean any harm, ma'am. We were just what?" Mrs. Harper interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Her tone wasn't angry, but there was a firmness to it that silenced him instantly. She stepped closer, the flashlight illuminating their guilty faces. "Stealing my peace, damaging my property, invading my home." Her words hit them like a punch to the gut. Guilt washed over them, overwhelming and suffocating. For weeks they had convinced themselves that sneaking into the pool was harmless fun, that Mrs. Harper wouldn't care because she never used it anyway. Now faced with the reality of their actions, they realized how selfish and thoughtless they had been. Instead of yelling or calling the police, Mrs. Harper surprised them by lowering the flashlight and gesturing toward her house. "Come inside," she said simply. Her voice was softer now, tinged with something that sounded like sadness rather than anger. Hesitant but unable to refuse, they followed her, leaving wet footprints across her pristine floors. The inside of Mrs. Harper's house was cozy and warm, filled with photographs and mementos from another era. Framed pictures lined the walls, capturing moments of laughter and love. There were images of children playing in the pool, family gatherings, and vacations spent together. In many of the photos, a young girl with curly hair and bright eyes stood beside Mrs. Harper, smiling broadly. Jake, Mia, and Ryan exchanged uneasy glances as they took in the sight, feeling more out of place than ever. Mrs. Harper led them to her living room, where she motioned for them to sit on the couch. She settled into an armchair across from them, studying their faces intently. For several minutes she said nothing, allowing the weight of the situation to sink in. Then, with a deep sigh, she began to speak. "This pool means more to me than you can imagine," she started, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "It's not just a body of water, it's a part of my life. My husband built it for our family. We spent countless summers here, creating memories with our children and grandchildren." She paused, pointing to one of the photographs on the wall. "That's my granddaughter, Emily. She loved this pool more than anything. Even now, whenever she visits, we spend hours sitting by the water talking about old times. Her gaze shifted, back to the teenagers who sat quietly, avoiding eye contact. Every time I see the mess you leave behind, the broken plant, the muddy footprints, the crumbs, I feel like you're erasing those memories. You're treating something precious as if it doesn't matter. Jake swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at him. He glanced at Mia and Ryan, both of whom looked equally ashamed. We didn't know, he admitted weakly. We didn't mean to hurt anyone. Mrs. Harper nodded slowly, accepting his apology but not letting them off the hook entirely. I believe you, she said, but ignorance doesn't excuse disrespect. What you've done has consequences, and I want you to understand that. She leaned forward, her expression softening slightly. Here's what's going to happen. Instead of involving the authorities, I'm giving you a chance to make amends. Over the next 2 weekends, you will help me organize a community event centered around the pool. You'll clean up the mess you've made, set up decorations, and assist with whatever else needs to be done. If you agree to this, I'll consider your debt repaid. The offer caught them completely off guard. They had expected punishment, maybe even humiliation, but not an opportunity to fix their mistakes. After a brief moment of hesitation, they nodded eagerly, grateful for the chance to redeem themselves. Over the following days, Jake, Mia, and Ryan threw themselves into the preparations. They worked tirelessly alongside Mrs. Harper, scrubbing the pool tiles, repairing the damaged furniture, and hanging colorful streamers around the yard. At first, their efforts were driven purely by guilt, but as they spent more time with Mrs. Harper, they began to see her in a different light. She wasn't the stern, intimidating figure they had imagined. She was kind, patient, and deeply passionate about her home and her memories. Through conversations during breaks, they learned about her life, how she met her late husband, the joys and challenges of raising a family, and the bittersweet loneliness that came with growing older. They discovered that the pool wasn't just a place for swimming. It was a symbol of connection, a reminder of the people she loved and the moments they shared. As the day of the event approached, excitement buzzed in the air. Flyers had been distributed throughout the neighborhood, inviting families to join in the celebration. On the morning of the big day, Jake, Mia, and Ryan arrived early to help with final preparations. Together, they transformed Mrs. Harper's backyard into a vibrant, welcoming space. Balloons bobbed gently in the breeze, music played softly in the background, and tables laden with snacks and drinks lined the patio. By noon, neighbors began trickling in, bringing laughter and energy with them. Children squealed with delight as they splashed in the pool, while parents lounged nearby, chatting and sipping lemonade. The atmosphere was lively and joyful, a stark contrast to the quiet solitude Mrs. Harper had grown accustomed to. Standing at the edge of the pool, watching the scene unfold, Jake, Mia, and Ryan felt a sense of pride they hadn't experienced before. This wasn't just about making amends, it was about creating something meaningful, something that brought people together. And as they glanced at Mrs. Harper, who was smiling warmly at the crowd, they realized they had gained far more than forgiveness. They had earned her trust, her friendship, and a newfound appreciation for the value of respect and responsibility. Little did they know, this event marked the beginning of a deeper bond between them and Mrs. Harper, one that would continue to grow in the weeks and months to come. The day of the community event was nothing short of magical. The sun shone brightly in a cloudless sky, casting golden rays over Mrs. Harper's backyard. Laughter filled the air as children splashed around in the pool, their giggles echoing off the walls of nearby houses. Parents lounged on colorful beach chairs, sipping cold drinks and chatting animatedly. For the first time in years, Mrs. Harper's home felt alive with energy, a stark contrast to the quiet solitude she had grown used to. Jake, Mia, and Ryan were everywhere at once, buzzing with nervous excitement. They helped hand out snacks, refilled cups of lemonade, and even organized games for the kids. Jake took charge of a water balloon toss, his booming voice encouraging participants to aim carefully. Mia assisted younger children who were hesitant to jump into the pool, offering gentle reassurance and holding their hands until they felt brave enough. Ryan, ever the entertainer, led a group of kids in an impromptu dance-off near the shallow end, his exaggerated moves drawing cheers and applause. Despite their efforts, none of them could shake the lingering sense of guilt that clung to them, like a shadow. Every smile they received from the neighbors, every thank you from Mrs. Harper, only reminded them of how close they had come to ruining this beautiful moment. But instead of letting shame consume them, they channeled it into action. They worked harder, laughed louder, and tried to make the event as perfect as possible, not just for themselves, but for Mrs. Harper and everyone else who had shown up. Mrs. Harper watched them closely, her heart swelling with pride. She saw how much effort they were putting into making the day special, how sincerely they interacted with the guests, and how genuinely sorry they seemed for their past behavior. It wasn't just about redemption anymore. They were learning valuable lessons about responsibility, empathy, and the importance of giving back to the community. As the afternoon wore on, the trio found themselves sitting together under a shaded canopy, taking a rare break from their duties. Their clothes were damp from running around and beads of sweat trickled down their faces, but they didn't mind. They leaned back in their chairs, watching the scene unfold before them with a mix of awe and satisfaction. "You know," Jake said thoughtfully, breaking the silence, "this actually feels kind of good." Mia raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly. "Good? You mean cleaning up after yourself and helping others?" "Yeah. Okay, fine," Jake admitted with a sheepish grin. "Maybe I'm starting to get why Mrs. Harper cared so much about all this." Ryan nodded in agreement, stretching his arms above his head. "I never realized how much work goes into something like this, or how cool it feels when people enjoy it. Like," he paused, searching for the right words, "like we actually made a difference today." Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Harper herself, who approached them carrying a tray of sandwiches and cookies. "Thought you three might need a snack," she said warmly, setting the tray down on the table between them. Her eyes sparkled with amusement as she noticed their exhausted but content expressions. "You've been working hard. I'm proud of you." The simple compliment hit them harder than they expected. Jake looked down at his feet, embarrassed but grateful. Mia smiled shyly, while Ryan gave Mrs. Harper a mock salute. "Just doing our duty, ma'am," he joked, earning a chuckle from her. For a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence, enjoying the brief respite from their busy schedule. Then, Mrs. Harper spoke again, her tone softer now. "You know, I haven't seen my granddaughter Emily in months. She lives far away, and life gets busy. But seeing all these kids playing in the pool today reminds me of her. And honestly, having you three here has been nice." Her words caught them off guard. Jake blinked in surprise, unsure of what to say. Mia's cheeks flushed pink, touched by the unexpected sentiment. Ryan cleared his throat awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Thanks, Mrs. Harper. That means a lot." After finishing their snacks, they returned to their tasks with renewed vigor. The event continued smoothly, with no major hiccups or disruptions. By evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, the crowd began to thin out. Families packed up their belongings, thanking Mrs. Harper profusely for hosting such a wonderful gathering. Some promised to return soon, while others praised the teenagers for their hard work. When the last guest left, Jake, Mia, and Ryan stood side by side, surveying the aftermath of the day. Empty cups and plates littered the tables. Towels lay scattered across the patio, and the pool water shimmered with tiny ripples caused by floating leaves. Despite the mess, there was an undeniable sense of accomplishment in the air. "Well," Jake said, breaking the silence, "guess we'd better clean this up." Mrs. Harper appeared beside them, shaking her head firmly. "Not tonight," she said. "You've done more than enough. Go home, rest, and come back tomorrow morning if you'd like to help tidy up. Tonight is for celebrating." Relieved, yet slightly guilty at being let off the hook, they thanked her and gathered their things. Before leaving, they each hugged her, a gesture that surprised even themselves, and promised to return early the next day. As they walked home together, The weight of the past weeks lifted from their shoulders, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. The following morning, true to their word, Jake, Mia, and Ryan arrived bright and early to assist with the cleanup. Together with Mrs. Harper, they scrubbed tables, swept the patio, and skimmed leaves from the pool. The work was tiring but satisfying, and they found themselves laughing and joking like old friends. By noon, everything was spotless, and the backyard looked as pristine as it had before their mischief began. Sitting on the patio afterward, Mrs. Harper handed them each a glass of iced tea. "I want to thank you," she said sincerely. "Not just for cleaning up or organizing the event, but for understanding why it mattered. This pool isn't just mine. It belongs to the memories I've shared with my family and friends. Seeing it bring joy to others again makes me happy." Her words struck a chord deep within them. Mia nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We'll never forget this, Mrs. Harper, we promise." With that promise came an unspoken agreement. Their relationship with Mrs. Harper wouldn't end here. Over the next few weeks, they visited her regularly, not to sneak into the pool but to spend time with her. They helped her tend to her garden, listened to her stories about the past, and even joined her for movie nights on the weekends. Slowly, but surely, they became part of her extended family. One evening, as they sat together on her porch, watching the stars, Mrs. Harper turned to them with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "the pool is open to the neighborhood now. If any of you want to use it, just ask. Respectfully, of course." Jake grinned, nudging Mia playfully. "Does that mean we're officially allowed?" Mrs. Harper chuckled, her eyes twinkling. "Let's call it supervised access." From that day forward, the pool became a symbol of trust and forgiveness. It wasn't just a place to swim anymore. It was a reminder of the lessons they had learned and the bonds they had formed. And though mistakes had brought them together, love and understanding kept them connected long after the summer ended. As the weeks turned into months, Jake, Mia, and Ryan's relationship with Mrs. Harper blossomed in ways none of them had anticipated. What began as an uneasy truce born out of guilt and redemption evolved into a genuine friendship that enriched their lives and hers in countless ways. The once forbidden pool became a shared sanctuary, not just for swimming but for laughter, conversation, and moments of quiet reflection. Every Saturday morning, the trio would show up at Mrs. Harper's house, armed with snacks and stories from their week. They helped her with chores she used to tackle alone, pruning the rose bushes in her garden, organizing old photo albums, or even painting the fence around the backyard. In return, Mrs. Harper treated them like family. She baked cookies, told fascinating tales about her youth, and listened patiently when they vented about school stress or teenage dilemmas. It was during these interactions that they realized how much wisdom and warmth she possessed, qualities they had overlooked before. One crisp autumn afternoon, while raking leaves together, Ryan paused mid-swing and glanced at Mrs. Harper curiously. "You know," he said, leaning on the rake, "you're way cooler than we gave you credit for." Mrs. Harper chuckled, brushing stray strands of silver hair from her face. "And you three are far more responsible than I initially thought," she replied with a twinkle in her eye. Though it took some convincing. They laughed, remembering the chaos of those first few nights sneaking into the pool. How reckless and carefree they had been, thinking only of themselves. Now, standing shoulder to shoulder with Mrs. Harper, they felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for her forgiveness but for the opportunity to grow and mature under her guidance. The neighborhood also noticed the change. Neighbors who had previously known Mrs. Harper only as the quiet woman with the beautiful pool now saw her differently. Her home became a hub of activity, hosting small gatherings and events that brought people closer together. Families would stop by on weekends to enjoy supervised swims, bringing homemade dishes to share. Children ran barefoot across her lawn, leaving behind footprints that no longer bothered her because they came with smiles and laughter. Jake, Mia, and Ryan played key roles in maintaining this newfound community spirit. They organized mini-tournaments, set up movie nights by the pool, and even created a sign-up sheet so neighbors could reserve time slots for using the pool. Their efforts earned them respect and admiration from adults who had once dismissed them as troublemakers. Parents thanked them for being such positive influences, while younger kids looked up to them as role models. For Mia, this transformation was particularly meaningful. Growing up, she had always struggled with self-doubt, feeling overshadowed by Jake's boldness and Ryan's charisma. But through her work with Mrs. Harper, she discovered hidden strengths, her ability to lead, mediate conflicts, and inspire others. One evening, after successfully resolving a minor squabble between two neighborhood kids over whose turn it was to dive next, Mrs. Harper pulled her aside. "You have a gift," she said softly, placing a hand on Mia's shoulder. "Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise." Mia blushed, unsure how to respond, but deep down she felt a spark of confidence ignite within her, one that would continue to grow in the months ahead. Winter arrived, blanketing the neighborhood in a soft layer of frost. The pool lay dormant, covered with a protective tarp, but its presence remained a constant reminder of the bond they had forged. On snowy days, Jake, Mia, and Ryan still visited Mrs. Harper, sitting by the fireplace and sipping hot chocolate as she read aloud from her favorite books. They decorated her Christmas tree together, stringing colorful lights and ornaments while sharing memories of past holidays. It was during one of these cozy evenings that Mrs. Harper made an announcement that caught them off guard. "I've decided to host a New Year's Eve party here," she declared, her eyes shining with excitement. "Not just for us, for the whole neighborhood." The idea seemed ambitious, especially considering the cold weather, but Jake immediately jumped at the chance to help plan it. "We can set up heaters outside," he exclaimed enthusiastically, "and maybe even build a bonfire near the pool." Ryan grinned, already envisioning marshmallow roasts and fireworks. "This is going to be epic," he said, rubbing his hands together. Mia hesitated, worrying about logistics. "Are you sure, Mrs. Harper? It's a lot of work." Mrs. Harper waved away her concerns with a smile. "With all of us working together, it won't feel like work at all. Besides, what better way to welcome the new year than surrounded by friends?" True to her word, the New Year's Eve celebration exceeded everyone's expectations. Strings of fairy lights illuminated the backyard, casting a warm glow over the snow-covered ground. Heaters buzzed softly, keeping guests comfortable despite the chill in the air. A large bonfire crackled near the pool, drawing clusters of people, who roasted marshmallows and sang songs late into the night. As midnight approached, Mrs. Harper handed out noisemakers and sparklers, her face glowing with happiness. When the clock struck 12, the sky erupted in a dazzling display of fireworks. Neighbors hugged each other, cheering and wishing one another well for the coming year. Jake, Mia, and Ryan stood beside Mrs. Harper, holding sparklers that traced golden patterns in the dark. For the first time in a long while, they felt truly connected to each other, to their community, and to the woman who had taught them so much. Looking back, they realized how much they had changed since that fateful summer. Sneaking into Mrs. Harper's pool had started as a reckless act of rebellion, driven by boredom and selfishness, but it had led them on a journey of growth, teaching them invaluable lessons about responsibility, empathy, and the power of second chances. Most importantly, it had shown them the beauty of forming meaningful connections, with people, with places, and with themselves. Mrs. Harper often reminded them that mistakes were part of life, but what mattered most was how they chose to learn from them. "No one is perfect," she would say, her voice filled with kindness. "But every day gives us a chance to do better." Years later, when they were older and busier with their own lives, Jake, Mia, and Ryan would still visit Mrs. Harper whenever they could. The pool might have aged, its surface slightly weathered by time, but it remained a symbol of the bond they had built, a testament to the transformative power of trust, forgiveness, and love. And though they had moved beyond their teenage years, they carried the lessons they learned with them, shaping the kind of people they wanted to be. In the end, they didn't regret sneaking into Mrs. Harper's pool, not entirely anyway. After all, If they hadn't taken that first step into forbidden waters, they might never have discovered the depth of her kindness or the ripple effect of their actions. Sometimes, life's greatest blessings come from our biggest blunders, and theirs had led them straight to the heart of something extraordinary.